Hi everybody, welcome to Lena Unedited, and I am your host, Lena Robinson. And we're going to be talking about a subject that's, I think, talking to a lot of people, I think they're all struggling with at the moment, which is motivation, and why so many of us are feeling unmotivated right now. So, and before we get going, if you can like and subscribe and do all those fun things, that would be amazing. So the first question I was sort of asking myself is, when my motivation drops, what's the kind of first story I tell myself when I'm lacking any kind of motivation? Funnily enough, I was thinking about this, I think I sort of have a rhetoric that runs in my head, which isn't helpful, I don't think, which is, am I just being lazy? First question. I think probably a lot of people ask the same questions. Am I losing my edge as a result of this lack of motivation? Am I falling behind? Or a question I think a lot of us ask is there something wrong with me? And the rhetoric is driven off those questions that I'm basically questioning of myself. And they're all crap. They're not things that are true. I'm definitely not a lazy person. Anybody that's ever worked with me or for me or around me know that I am a person that gets stuff done. I think my confidence being knocked over the last couple of years has definitely put a rhetoric in my head that maybe I'm losing my edge. And also I'm getting older, so I constantly think, am I keeping up, blah, blah, blah. Which brings the question of, am I falling behind? And, I don't run at work and life at the same speed I used to, nor should I don't think. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat today. And the answer is, I don't think I'm necessarily falling behind, and I know there's definitely nothing wrong with me, but I think it is a thing that a lot of us, as whether we're in business, in our careers, or we're founders of a business, they are things that when our motivation drops, we kind of pull ourselves apart, pull ourselves up, think that there's something wrong with us. And I think that's not really the question we need to be asking, actually, because that leads to all the negative stuff and then continues the cycle of not feeling motivated. So then you've got to ask yourself, well, what's kind of usually going on behind that or underneath that loss of drive? And I'm going to be really honest, and I think a lot of people will probably recognize this. I think we're living in a world at the moment that's just a bit all over the place. And I think a lot of people I'm talking to there is burnout, driven by overwhelm, doing too many things, trying to do too much. There's a lot of fear out there. I think there's fear because of the economy. I think there's fear from people if they want to change jobs, they're struggling to find a job. I think there's fear about people's businesses because it's not as easy to find new business anymore or to hold on to the business that you had. It's definitely getting harder. Boredom, that's a good one. I think sometimes people, if they're in a job that they're not getting stimulated in, or there's a lack of purpose in what they're doing, either in their job or in their business, then, boredom can definitely, I think, play a part in not feeling motivated. I think there's definitely, if there's misalignment, so if you've got personal purpose and drive, and that's not aligning with the business that you're running or the business that you're working for. I'm hearing that a lot from employed people at the moment. They haven't got businesses that they're working for that have good leadership. I think that misalignment between what they want to be doing to move their careers forward, but also to be working for an organisation that values them and understands them. You're more likely to be loyal and harder working and have motivation if you're working for an organisation that deserves your time and your energy and your effort. I think sometimes we outgrow things. So, even if you've built a business, sometimes you can come to a point where you've either outgrown the thing that you're offering as a service offering, or you're offering as a product, or it's just not motivating you anymore and you're just not feeling that thing that used to get you up and make you feel excited, you can outgrow things. You can outgrow your own business. You can outgrow a job. That's happened to me many times in my career where I've definitely outgrown jobs. Not necessarily because I didn't like the people, but I'd had a ceiling and I couldn't for lots of different reasons, couldn't reach the next level or didn't want to reach the next level. So I think there is an element of outgrowing things as well. And that's more difficult when you own your own business, I think. I definitely hit that when I had my last business. Although I was the one that had started it and then I'd brought on my business partner, Adam, I kind of felt like it wasn't aligning with where I wanted to go anymore through nobody's fault. It wasn't anything the business had done wrong or what we were offering wasn't any good, because it's brilliant and Adam's taken it on to a whole new level since we parted ways, which I'm really proud of, that he took that business and took it to another level. And I do think you can outgrow things when it's not going towards your own purpose anymore and it's not heading in the direction. That definitely happens, and that's harder to deal with. Like if you're a solo entrepreneur, then do you close it down? Do you sell it? Like what do you do? ? I was lucky enough to have a partner that happily wanted to take on the business. I was able to sell my 50% to him, and it carried on. So it felt like that was a good ending, and a good thing for both of us, which was great. And we've stayed friends as a result of that good parting of ways. And I think the other thing that I think is driving a loss of drive and motivation at the moment is definitely the global uncertainty. You just have to go onto social media, which can in itself possibly be a bit ski whiff, I think. Doesn't always show what the reality of life is, good or bad. Sometimes I'm seeing far too much negative stuff, and actually all I have to do is go to Kew Gardens or go out into Wandsworth Common or do something nice, and I'm not feeling that the whole world is a negative, right? So, but I do acknowledge that there is global uncertainty about economics. I think lots of people are struggling to run their businesses. Lots of people are struggling in their careers because AI is coming, or because they might want to change job, or, the business may have got rid of some people. And so they're having to carry more work, or, they're scared that they're going to lose their own job and all that kind of thing. So there's definitely a lot of global uncertainty. So when you look at what's driving a lack of motivation across the board, these all things, definitely go into it. And health, our own health. I know sometimes for me, when my health's being a bit annoying, and normally I'm talking about chronic illness, well, just the last week and a half, 2 weeks nearly, I've actually had a bit of a weird flu virus, and it's gone up and down. I was able to do a bit here and there, but then I had to take more time off. So, that's definitely your health being not on track is also something that can massively motivate you. But here's the question, again, which, having just talked about a whole lot of things that can impact it, how much of what we call a lack of motivation is actually fear? And if that fear is there, what's that fear of specifically? So, I think it can be, sometimes we can have a fear of judgment with things that we're thinking we're doing, or where we're going, or what we're trying to do. I think there is a fear of visibility, almost, that we're exposing ourselves by what we're doing, or maybe there's not enough visibility in our business, and that's worrying us. I do think that is a common feeling of rejection. If we're trying to go after new business, one of the biggest things I had whenever I've been training salespeople, or wherever I've been working with businesses on their new business strategy or what have you, they always get fearful about picking up the phone or sending an email because they're scared of rejection. And that happens to everybody, by the way. Even though new business is one of my specialities, and sales and so forth, I still get sometimes days where I don't want to pick up phones, or I don't want to do things. I think that happens to everybody. And to say it doesn't I call bullshit on that. I think everybody does. And a funny story on that, I remember the first sales job I ever had. It was for a company in New Zealand called Profile Publishing, and they owned magazines. And they paid none of the sales staff any base salary at all. It was all 100% you were paid by what you sold. And I remember what was interesting about that is the owner of the business, Reg Birchfield, who launched, I think it's called New Zealand Business Review, one of the big business-to-business publications in New Zealand, which I think is still running today. I remember him saying to us as salespeople, if you are not in the mood to sell, go shopping, go do something fun, go have lunch with your friends. On the plus side, he wasn't having to pay us when we weren't working, but he also understood. He understood that when you have a fear of rejection or when you're feeling down on things, you're more likely not to sell anything. So he said, you're better off going home, resetting and starting again, which I agree with 100%, by the way. And I do think even, that was the 90s when I started that job. Some of you probably weren't even born. But, that fear of rejection, and I've been doing sales for a really, really long time, decades, I still get that feeling. And that's okay. I do think there's a big fear at the moment around financial insecurity, and I think that covers whether you're in a career, whether you're going into your first jobs, or whether you own a business. I think financially at the moment there's a lot of small to medium businesses in particular really, really struggling. There's a lot of financial uncertainty, a lot of things like taxes changing and increasing, way you do things is changing, and there's definitely a lot of financial uncertainty because businesses are struggling to find new business because not as much money is being spent because, again, fear is driving. They're not wanting to spend stuff. But I also think that there is insecurity in people that have even got salaried jobs. I think there's a lot of people being let go. Now, I don't want to focus on all the negative, but I do want to acknowledge that a lack of motivation can be around fear. And, there's also, it's a weird one, but it's a fear of success can also happen. It's happened to me a few times where I'll be halfway through doing something and all of a sudden the enormity of what I'm going after and the success that I'm starting to have freaks me the fuck out, to be honest. And I think it happens to a lot of people. The more I've talked to people, the more I've realised that actually that's not an uncommon thing. And I think a lot of imposter syndrome kicks in at that point as well, where you're thinking, I've got all this success, but do I really deserve it, kind of thing. Silly crap that we tell ourselves. And I think there's also a lot of change going out there in the business world. I think that's being hugely driven by the change in expectation and behaviours post-pandemic. I think we have a whole new generation of people that have different expectations in business around workflow, around what their expectations are in an organisation. And I also think there's a lot of change about how we hire, who we hire, what we're hiring them for, the criteria, the skills that we're requiring. AI is having a massive impact on things. And I think we're in a world of change right now, which is, I want to say unprecedented, but I'm not sure it is unprecedented. I think we've been hit by a lot of changes in the last, while I've been working in the last 36 years of working, there's been a lot of change. The internet came along. When I first started working, it was difficult. I think you had a little bit of email, but when I first started, everything was on DOS computers and a whole world has changed. When I first started working, there were still fax machines and a whole lot of stuff has changed around social media. First it was the web, then it was social media, and now it's AI. And I think a lot of fear is coming out of that. And then let's look specifically more deeply into the sort of current global economic, political and business climate and how that's feeding into quite a collective drop in motivation. So I think a lot of business owners and even people in businesses, there's a lot of stuff coming at us at the moment. There's a lot of information, and I think there's a lot of decision fatigue around that. Which way do I go in order to be successful? For me, the big decisions have been, do I keep my businesses going, or do I get a job, or what direction do I do? Do I go down the podcasting and creating content? Or lots of big questions. And I must admit, I've had a bit of decision fatigue. I have made my decisions, by the way, so it's okay now. And I'm heading in those directions. And there does feel like there's constant bad news. I mean, Trump, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of issues around immigration and racism and, the almost Handmaid's Tale approach to women happening in the States and hitting here, and the incel movements and, the Maniverse and all those kinds of things. I think there's instability. And on top of that, there's a pressure to keep performing. And I think when all those things are happening, motivation is categorically going to disappear. But what I then wanted to look at and started thinking about is at what point has motivation returned in my life without me forcing it, and what has kind of changed around me at the time. The number one thing that I think consistently happens when I find the motivation comes back, having lacked a bit of motivation, environment is quite important, which is why, although unfortunately I've not gone out there today because with my finger I still find it difficult to do, holding the phone and everything. But I find environment, so I think I get a lot of motivation by going back into nature, to having an environment around me that is uncluttered physically. So I have a challenge where one part of me is very OCD and likes everything organised, but on the other hand, I have a bit of ADHD challenge where everything just goes chaotic. And then on top of that, you've got bipolar and you've got the manic side of you just sends everything into chaos. So having a physical environment around me that is always stable, always where I want to be, and in a place that I enjoy, whether it be out in the park or it be in a place that gives me inspiration, like a gallery or going to an exhibition, or something that is around going to things like Kew Gardens or going and talking to people at gardens at the National Garden Scheme, which is another reason, why I wanted to be part of that organisation. I think also by the decluttering side of my environment and my brain and being in the right place, I think when I sort of step back from everything, I get clarity. That clarity comes from the physical environment, as we've just talked about, but it also comes from giving my brain and my body the rest it needs. So I listen to that. And I think it's really important that anybody that's challenged with motivation, I think you need to take the rest. When your body is telling you to rest, we often ignore it. And I think it's really important. Boundaries, setting boundaries. I do find that even when I've set boundaries with my friends or my clients or my colleagues or people that I work with, or even really good friends of mine, they tend to have what I call boundary creep. Sometimes you just have to reset those boundaries. So one of the boundaries I used to have very strongly was when I was coming back and starting to think about returning to any kind of work whatsoever following my illness. One of my boundaries was I will talk to people, and it's a bit of a difficult thing with me because I'm often friends with the people I do work with or become friends with them. It gets a bit of a blurred line. So I try and reset the rules of 9 to 5 is when I talk about work stuff. If you want to talk about non-work stuff, you can call me anytime. But if you're ringing and talking to me about work specifically, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that is it. Don't want to be talking about business any other time because I need the boundary to protect me and my health and well-being and my rest. So boundaries are really, really important. And funnily enough, it was my whole theme of all of my therapy with my therapist last year was all about boundary setting. So thank you for that, Miss Therapist. I'm not going to say her name. But then I think you also need to surround yourself with the right people. So I've done a lot of work over the last few years of making sure that the people around me are the people that lift me up when I need it, are enjoyable to be around when we're just all doing things. That doesn't mean they can't come to me with their problems. That's fine. That's what friends are for. You're there for each other. But I think you have to be around the people that will ultimately back you and support you whether you are up or down. They will celebrate your successes, and they will be down in the trenches with you, trying to help you get back up if you've fallen. I think having those really amazing people in your inner circle particularly, and sometimes that's not your family, be blunt, it's not. I'm lucky, mine is, but I know a lot of people where that is not the case. But do surround yourself with people that probably should be your family and probably mentally are your family, but maybe just not by blood. I think those people, I had a really good example of this today. I was on Startup Club for the New Zealand Business Women's Network, and it was just a whole lot of us that we all are friends, and I always feel uplifted at the end of one of those sessions with them. We talk about our successes, we talk about what we need, and an update on just where we are for the week. And I find it really amazing. And I think also when I've given myself permission to, having had a wobble, it's okay. And I think the permission that you need to give yourself to, get back on track and be kind to yourself about getting back on track when it comes to motivation, that permission to go ahead and chase after your dreams, go ahead and have a play with things, the permission to truly be yourself, that self-permission, I think that's really, really important. I think there's also a question around, how often do we treat motivation like a personal failing instead of information worth listening to? So what we've just talked about now is like, if you're feeling unmotivated, it's actually the symptom of something as opposed to it's the problem. It's actually just the result of something. So when you get into that situation where you need to start listening to and addressing some of the things that are happening, I think what happens often is that when we're feeling in that situation, we're feeling unmotivated. A lot of the times, particularly in the past, I used to do that thing where you double down and you push through a motivation slump instead of paying attention to the motivation slump. And you got to ask yourself, what does it cost you, both personally and professionally, to just soldier on, keep calm and carry on? I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, I think that's utter bollocks. And I lived in that utter bollocks for a really, really long time, and it did not help. And I think it massively contributed to my mental and physical well-being taking a nosedive for quite a few years. And I think it's really important that rather than pushing through, question why we're having it, which is why we've just been talking about, why does it happen? Which brings us to the point that if motivation isn't the problem, what might it actually be pointing to? I think we need to ask ourselves that when we're feeling unmotivated and go through the things that I've just talked about around, get to the heart of what it is that's the motivation is disappearing. And then you've got to, then you ask yourself and figure out, it's like, what needs my attention right now, kind of thing, in order to be able to get your motivation. So is it that you're surrounding yourself with the wrong types of people? Is it that your environment just isn't making you feel good? Is it, is it sitting on and doom scrolling? Like, it's why all I do is I've got 3 different accounts, actually no, 4 different accounts that I'm managing, 3 of which are my own. And of those 3, I'm mainly now on Floralicious most of the time, because the scrolling is just plants and people talking about gardening and talking about just fun things. Like, when I'm not doom scrolling, I'm just scrolling because it's fun and it's interesting and it's educational, and it makes me happy to just see pictures of beautiful plants and flowers and blah, blah, blah. There is stuff about the environment and the challenges that we've got in the planet, but at the same time, it's usually solution oriented rather than just a big complaint, which is my area of what I like to be sitting in. So here's the thing that I want to sort of push it back to you. What do I want people watching this, especially people in business and founders, to feel less alone about today? Well, first of all, if you're having that feeling of a lack of motivation, you are not alone. I think tapping into a community that might be surrounding you that you may not even be aware is there, but if you step back, you might see there's a group of people, whether they're also people in your industry that are in business that you get along with, or just people that you've had as friends over the years or what have you. I think you need to tap into that. I think you need to have a think about the fact that, there's people like me you can reach out to, like, whenever anybody is feeling a bit unmotivated or down, feel free. My contact details are in the show notes. You can put a comment on here, and maybe there's other people that are listening to it might be able to help as well. I really am very supportive of having a safe environment for people to talk to. So it's okay to talk about the things that are happening negatively in your life. What I'm not okay with is negative commentary of people having a go at other people and being nasty. So that's not something that I'm up for. But I think we've talked about it before. Tap into your community. I think talk to people and surround yourself with the kind of people that are going to be helpful. I don't want you feeling like you're the only person in the world that feels like this, because I think there's a lot of time where we can get overwhelmed and stressed out about running our businesses or being in our careers, that you feel unmotivated. But what I want you to take away, if nothing else, is that being unmotivated is simply a symptom. You are not doing anything necessarily. You're not wrong, as in that you're not bad, you've not fucked up, you've not whatever. All you have to do is step back from it for a moment and see, where is it coming from? Get to the heart of it. It happens in health and wellness as well. Like, quite often in modern medicine, they try and just fix the symptom, when in actual fact what they need to do is get to the bottom of the causation. So questions I'd be asking yourself is like, what's causing it? Where's it coming from? And yeah, that's kind of it really. And you're not alone. I'm here definitely, and I think our community is here. The Fuck Status Quo community is definitely here. So that's it for me today. I hope it's helped. It's quite a long one. I always do really long ones when I'm in the house. I think my hand's not having to hold anything, so it's all right. But anyway, I hope everybody has a good weekend. I hope everybody has had a good day. And if you are feeling unmotivated, reach out. Talk to one of us. Talk to somebody in your own community, or talk to this community. Hopefully we'll be able to help. Anyway, see you next week. Have a good day, everybody. See you later.